Saka. Ojo que lo va a bajar Rice. ¡Gol!
Bueno.
Gol del Arsenal. Gol de Declan Rice. Locura en el Emirates, porque en el 96 de partido, bueno, la que se está montando, marca Declan Rice el 2-1. ¡Locura, gol del Arsenal! ¡Locura, gol del Arsenal! Declan Rice, Declan Rice, Declan Rice, Declan Rice, Declan Rice.
This is Arsecast Extra.
Hello and welcome to a brand new Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, goodly morning to you.
Goodly morning, Andrew. How you doing?
I'm good. 6 of the best dished out to West Ham yesterday. Take that!
Yeah, 6 of the best. I actually didn't realise that's what 6 of the best was referring to.
What did you think it was?
I don't know, just 6 of the best goals, or I don't know, something nicer than strikes. But nevertheless, that is what we delivered yesterday.
Yeah, it's corporal punishment, basically, isn't it? You are going to get 6 of the best, said the teacher with his cane and his cape and his weird little hat like they used to have. And then they give you 6 lashes with a cane or a strap. That's what we had. And we had actually both. When I was growing up in school, we had a big leather strap and a cane. So we were very lucky, privileged, to have a bit of variety in terms of how we were beaten. A bit like West Ham.
Yeah, well, the strap was on the other hand this time, Andrew. It was your turn to dish out the corporal punishment to West Ham United.
And much deserved after 2 defeats to West Ham this season. I think there was a sense of not quite revenge in the air, but we owed them one after being beaten in the EFL Cup, which, I guess most people can take or leave, compartmentalize in their own way. But certainly the defeat in December against West Ham at home was quite painful. It delivered quite a lot of introspection and discussion, and it's tied in with that period of the season where we didn't have a lot of football going on. So there was a lot of poring over that particular defeat, and I think Arsenal answered the questions fairly emphatically yesterday. Yeah,
I think there was obviously those 2 defeats to West Ham this season. There was this game in the league last season where we were 2-0 up after 10 minutes and yet managed to drop points at a critical point in the title race. There was the whole sort of Declan Rice thing of, him having not beaten West Ham since joining Arsenal, having lost, in fact, in 2 separate games. And I suppose just that question of a potential hangover from the Liverpool game. Could we follow up that result with another win? Could we, Andrew, justify those celebrations? And we did.
We certainly did. Were you cognizant of a measure of anxiety before the game? Because, we played very well against Liverpool, and then you're looking at West Ham and you're thinking, well, we've lost a couple of times. Is it a potential banana skin? Are we capable of doing this? Can we go there and sort of build on what we did last week? And then the team came out and the lineup was announced, and there was no Emile Smith-Rowe. There was no Takahiro Tomiyasu on top of Thomas Partey, Jurrien Timber, Fabio Vieira, Gabriel Jesus was not in the squad. Who else am I missing? There's somebody else.
Jorginho had a foot problem as well,
yeah.
I think, ongoing.
I think we missed 7 in total. There's somebody I'm not thinking of. But Zinchenko, of course, was not available as well. So you've 7 first-team players out, and I don't know about you, but I certainly got some messages from friends going, that bench, I'm not sure that's given me a great deal of comfort if this is a game where it's not going your way, you have to turn to the bench to change things, you can understand why there was a measure of anxiety or maybe a little bit of doubt as to whether or not that might happen. So there really was an onus on that first 11 to get the job done.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I don't know about broadly if there was anxiety, but I know I felt a little bit of anxiety. I mean, how could you not really, given the way those West Ham games have gone this season? And, a few important personnel missing, nobody really coming back to, ease off the injury situation. So, yeah, I think there was definitely a bit of concern there. I mean, what did you make of the team that Mikel Arteta actually picked? Were you surprised about any aspect of it?
Not really, in terms of, when you take into account who was available and who wasn't available. Like with no Tomiyasu or no Zinchenko, it meant keep your left back. Up front, I mean, it was nominally... I mean, who was up front? Was it Havertz? Was it Trossard? It was kind of hard to tell at times. But you can understand, in a game like this, where West Ham are probably going to sit deep in a low block, which I think is being very kind to them, just from the point of view that it's, you can say you're playing a low block, but you're also playing in a very, very unambitious way, might be another way of looking at it, right? But if
I think that's fair.
If that's what you're going to face, then up front, somebody like Trossard or Havertz is a better option than Eddie Nketiah, because you need those sort of link-ups in around their box and all the rest. So no, I wasn't particularly surprised by anything there. Were you?
No. I was just intrigued, I think, to see how that Havertz-Trossard relationship would play out. I think it was sort of predominantly Trossard as a kind of false nine, but, everything that entails means he was all over the place, dragging players out of position, coming deep at times. Havertz was pushing on. There were points in the game where it looked almost like an old-fashioned 4-4-2, big man, little man, strike partnership up there. And, it was actually quite difficult to interpret sort of what our overall shape might have been, because we were so dominant. We were so often in their half that a lot of our players were pressed on. There were times where we had 4 or 5 players in the penalty box at points in that half, which was really impressive and really showed how in control we were. As for West Ham, I mean, they're going through an interesting period. They sold a couple of attacking players in the January transfer window. Benrahma was one, another I forget. Somebody else left the club. Spanish guy. Fornals. Yeah, and they didn't really replace them. They seem to be playing a fullback at left wing in this game, and it was quite a negative lineup. Antonio's out injured as well, so and Paqueta too. So I think they were pretty negative. I think calling it a low block is a little bit kind to them. I mean, essentially, they were just a team who didn't have the ball and didn't have any territory. Yeah,
and didn't know what to do with the ball when they got it, and weren't allowed to do anything with the ball, when they got it. It's quite interesting. They beat Manchester United, they beat Arsenal in December, and since then they haven't won a game. They've gone out of the FA Cup to Bristol City. They pretty much shot their load against us and United and have been fairly bad since, You're always looking at a game like this and go, well, their form has been bad. Is today the day they turn it around? But no, it wasn't. And I think it was really interesting from the very, very start. I don't know if you noticed this. Our kickoff routine changed. Did you see that?
I think I missed the first 30 seconds.
Right.
You'll have to enlighten me.
So usually what we do with the kickoff is we play it back, it goes to David Raya, and he launches it long.
Yeah. We've done that for a few seasons now.
This time we did not. Went back to David Raya and we just kept possession. And I think that was deliberate. It was a way of setting the tone for what was to come, and it was a way of showing, okay, we're not going to give you this ball back. If you want the ball, you're going to have to come and win it. You're going to have to take it from us. And, West Ham just weren't able to do that. I think by 13 minutes, they'd flashed up a graphic on the screen that Arsenal had 90% possession in the opening 13 minutes. you know? And that kind of dominance, you know, it's not completely unusual, but away from home against a team who, you know, you've lost to a couple of times this season, who should be, because of what they've done in the last few weeks, when it comes to their own form, absolutely fired up at home in front of their own fans, determined to make life really difficult for Arsenal, the way they made life difficult for us at the Emirates. And, you know, there'll be a lot of focus on how bad West Ham were. And that's, you know, true. When you lose a game 6-0, you were bad. When you're 4-0 down at halftime, you were bad. But I think sometimes that detracts from the team that has been really, really good. And West Ham were made to look bad by Arsenal yesterday from start to finish, all the way through. I think we deserve a whole lot more credit for being good than West Ham do for being bad.
I think that's broadly true. I think they were especially bad in that little period before half-time, and Arsenal really capitalised then and kind of ran away with it, as it were. But, you know, that first half hour, we were still very dominant, and at that point, you know, it was a relatively evenly poised game in terms of the scoreline anyway, and I think we were doing a lot right in that time. So, yeah, I think we were very, very good. I also think they were very bad, and what was, I suppose, most impressive about us, and maybe what was felt a little bit fresh and a little bit of a change from what we saw before Christmas, is that in the period where they were struggling, we were really, really ruthless with them. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably draw some parallels with the game at the Emirates in a way.
Definitely, yeah.
Because I think possession-wise, you know, I think we had more possession in the home games. By halftime, it was like 72% possession to 28%, and yesterday was maybe 70-30. So it's fairly minimal. But what was certainly a lot more effective, you know, that game, was that the one where we had 30 shots, and, you know, you couldn't say really that there were a load of big chances in there, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think the way we used the ball yesterday, the link-ups that we had, you know, within the front three, you know, I thought Havertz and Trossard actually combined really well together at times. We were dangerous looking. We were more dangerous looking in this game than we were in the home game. But
I think that's true, yeah.
As you say,
there were chances, weren't there? You know, I remember Trossard having a headed chance from a Saka cross. He forced a very good save out of Areola. You know, just sort of one of those where he struck it almost too cleanly, too well, and it was quite close to the keeper, but still it was good reactions. Odegaard had a shot deflected wide. Yeah. And regularly I was seeing Arsenal get 5 or 6 men, you know, beyond the kind of 18-yard line and really getting bodies in the box and applying the pressure, turning the screw on West Ham.
Yes, and I think, you know, one of the things that is maybe overlooked in discussion of the home game is that, like, people will say Arsenal were bad because we got beaten 2-0, and there's an element of truth to that, of course. But I think West Ham that night were very good defensively. Their low block really worked. Their unambitious approach to the game paid off because they got not a fortunate goal, but they got a goal, and then they got a set-piece goal, and, you know, it just went their way. Whereas I think yesterday, that same commitment to the defending was just not there. It just wasn't there, you know. And you mentioned how that period before the break, when we really turned the screw, that they sort of fell apart. I think that's true, but it required us to open the scoring. Set piece, you know, these goals look very simple when they go in that way. It was quite similar to the goal Saliba scored. Was it against Burnley?
Quite possibly.
It was just a cross, and he's just, you know, stronger than anyone around him, and he heads it home. And I think there was something to that, similar to that in the first goal. A good corner from Declan Rice, and William Saliba headed home. It was quite funny, wasn't it? Because when Rice was going over to the corner to take it, there was some sort of pantomime boos, and then they were saying, "Oh, there's a bit of applause there for Declan Rice." Don't think they were applauding then after that goal went in.
If there was any applause, it quickly stopped when William Saliba nodded that ball into the back of the net. That's something I should have said about the lineup. You know, although we had Trossard in and, he's, as centre forwards go, he's about as small as they come, it was a very tall, physical Arsenal team. If you look, it was basically 4 centre halves at the back, White and Kivior at fullback, Gabriel and Saliba in the middle. In midfield, you had Rice, you had Havertz. There was a lot of height and power there. And, from those set pieces, especially the corners early on, we were doing that thing where we just loaded the back post. We had sort of 4 or 5 players all starting at the back post and then, making their moves from there. And it just seemed to flummox West Ham. I think if you watch the goal as well, Saliba, before he gets the ball, Ben White just gives the slightest little nudge to the goalkeeper.
Yes, he does. I love him so much.
Which I don't think is sufficient really to explain quite how caught in no man's land the goalkeeper is. But it's classic Ben White antics.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I have zero sympathy for any team that leaves Ben White within the proximity of their goalkeeper without putting somebody in the way to deal with him, because you know by now what Ben White is about and what he's going to try and do and what his role is, because it's a very clearly defined role, right? When we have these set pieces, his job is basically to unsettle the goalkeeper.
Yeah.
And he's been doing
impede, do whatever's necessary.
Exactly. And he's been doing it for a long time. Sometimes he gets away with it. Sometimes he doesn't. As we've seen, we've had a goal disallowed because, he was very gently caressing the hand of the Leicester goalkeeper that time. But, if you're preparing for a match against Arsenal and you don't have a plan in place to deal with Ben White when there is a corner or a set piece, I'm sorry, but it's all on you. Mm-hmm. So it's 1-0, and that sort of, I think, not quite settled it down, because you're, as long as it's scoreless, you're like, oh, is this going to be another one of those days? And then immediately we could have had 5 goals before halftime. When you think about it, there was I think
Saka had a hat trick of chances before the penalty.
Yeah, I mean, there was a brilliant cross from Kivior, which he headed wide, and then there was one, I think Odegaard played him in. He tried to just sort of dink it over the goalkeeper and just caught it too much with the outside of his foot. I think Havertz was looking for a pass there as well. So, there were chances straight away. As soon as the goal went in, West Ham fell apart defensively. I don't know what happened. Sometimes a goal going in can make you, redouble your defensive efforts and get organised. But this just seemed to completely undermine what little confidence they had in their own approach.
Yeah, it did. And their over the next couple of goals, their offside line was pretty poor, one from open play, one from a set piece situation. But Arsenal, as I said, they were ruthless, and I think they sensed West Ham's vulnerability. They knew how important it was to try and kill the game, especially, I suppose, having been dragged back into a match in this fixture last season. And I was really encouraged by the way that they kind of seized the momentum that West Ham seemed prepared to hand them.
Having missed a couple of chances, it was Bukayo Saka then who won the penalty. I need. I don't know if you can tell me, but maybe the situation with the goalkeeper. I thought the double jeopardy thing only applied when the player made an obvious attempt for the ball. And I don't think the goalkeeper did there. I wonder, it's moot, obviously, at this point, but I do wonder if that might have been more of a red card than a yellow card for Areola. I know there was a player on the line, but is it not the very definition of denying a goal-scoring opportunity without, making an attempt to play the ball? It's one thing if he goes diving for the ball to try and get it and misses it, but Saka had gone beyond him. He just pulled him back. Yeah,
it was a very odd, sort of lazy challenge, I thought, from Areola. Who had a very mixed afternoon. I mean, made that good save from Trossard, but I thought was otherwise pretty poor in the game. I just felt like this goal, I mean, it's a nice pass from Trossard, nice run from Saka, good bit of skill around the goalie, but it all just looked way too easy from an Arsenal perspective. You know, it's sort of like quite a straightforward loop ball over the top. Saka runs onto it. You don't see that happen very often at Premier League level because defences generally make it harder for you than that. And West Ham just didn't. Were you confident in Saka when he stepped up?
Yeah. Yeah, because you have to really think about this young man's character. At 22 years of age, he's been through a lot in terms of ups and downs and what's happened to him from the penalty spot, right? Not just for Arsenal, because he missed one here last season, and obviously that was a moment for... Would that have made that game 3-1?
3-1,
I think it would have made it 3-1.
In real control.
Yeah, look, who knows what would have happened in the rest of the season, but it did feel like a little bit of a sliding doors moment in terms of our title challenge. I know there was a lot more to it, but 3-1, I think we go on and win that game against West Ham, and who knows what happens from there. But, he's also missed a big penalty for England in his time. And yesterday, he just picked the ball up and knew exactly what he was going to do with this. I was 99.9% confident that he was going to score there. You?
That's good. No, I never am with Bukayo. I have to say, and I think it might be a hangover from the fact that I was in that stadium. I was in Wembley Stadium for the Euros final when he missed that penalty kick, and it was, horrible moment for me as an Arsenal fan and an Englishman as well. So I think I carry the trauma of that a little bit into whenever I see him step up for a penalty. There are players who I've felt much more confident about over the years taking pens. And I think in the summer I was kind of like, Odegaard should be the penalty taker. And he did take the one, I think, on the opening day of the season, or certainly very early on in the season. But delighted that he put it away, and he did do so pretty comprehensively. Looked like he gave the goalkeeper the eyes, went the other direction, and I think that was his 50th Arsenal goal. Is that right? That was his 50th Arsenal goal. It was also his in his career, he has taken 8 penalties for Arsenal and scored 7 of them. So great. He's got a good track record from the spot. True. So that's why I was confident. And I was just confident because it felt like a moment for him. And when there is that opportunity for Bukayo Saka, more often than not, he will take it. You don't do what he has done he got to 50 goals. He's 51 goals and 49 assists now for Arsenal. Is that... Yeah, that after his second goal, it's 51 goals, 49 assists, yeah. It's an incredible... I don't know why Transfermarkt have him on 53 assists, but I think there's something to do with penalties, one being given as an assist for some of the stats. So, you just don't do what he has done at his age without being able to step up in those moments. I think he's... No, and I think as well, he probably has I think missing a couple of high-profile penalties probably gives him a very good perspective on it. Mm-hmm. I think... he probably understands that if you take penalties for your whole career, there are going to be some important ones you miss. But you're probably still going to score most of them. Yeah. And I think sort of understanding that and accepting that and wanting to take on that responsibility anyway tells you a bit about the kind of character he is. Yeah. Yeah. And he made no mistake, put it away. 2-0 and... pretty quickly, it's 3-0. There's a free kick out on the right. Declan Rice curls in. Gabriel comes over and whispers something to Declan Rice. That's happened a lot. Have you noticed that in the last few weeks, that when we're taking free kicks from around those sort of areas, certainly in the opposition half, whoever's over it, it's usually Rice and Odegaard, but Gabriel has often been over to have a discussion. I don't know what they're saying. Stick it on my head, son. Yeah. I think whatever the Brazilian. I'm going to jump higher than everyone else. Yeah. I'm going to loaf it in if you just fucking stick it in there. But he has been involved in those discussions. It was a very good ball in, really good movement, really good header from Gabriel. Any questions about West Ham defensively? I think what Arsenal do from these set pieces
makes it really, really difficult for the opposition. You know, the way they stand offside, jump back onside, and it confuses and frightens the fuck out of the defense. Yeah. Because you don't know where to go and what to do. And I think there's, you know, people have talked about Nicolas Jover and the work that he has done. That kind of choreographing of that movement is right off the training ground. You have to work 100%. On that. You really do have to work on that. The timing of it is really important. And it makes it so, if you're the defender and you're going, well, he's standing offside, and then, oh shit, he's onside now. And then, you know, I think it's absolutely bamboozling at times the way Arsenal move from these set pieces. And, you know, it's playing a big part in why we are so effective in scoring so many goals from set pieces.
Yeah, and I think it was Ben Johnson on this one who sort of got caught in two minds and essentially played about three Arsenal players on side. But I think you're right, that movement is so integral, and we continue to innovate with it across the course of the season. You know, I spoke about the corner from which Saliba scored, all these like 4 or 5 players standing outside the back post and then starting their movement from there. You know, we're giving, and I think that was probably in part specifically designed for West Ham because they put Souček on the near post. Yeah. That's an area where they're really strong. So, you know, finding these weak points and exploiting them, you know, it's imagine if you told us during the kind of latter days of Arsene Wenger that we'd become relatively soon afterwards the set piece team in the league. It would have been difficult to believe, but there you go.
It is counterintuitive, isn't it? Because of, you know, the sort of tactical approach to the game that Mikel Arteta has, and the way that you imagine he wants his team to play football. But he said it a few weeks ago when, I can't remember after which game it was, but he said, if we want to be the best team in the world, we have to be the best at everything. And that's true. You know, there is a need to absolutely maximize every possible chance of scoring a goal. And some people might think it's a little, I don't know, is it, you know, set pieces have often been the sort of the remit of teams who, you know, like West Ham, for example, yesterday, they might consider their best chance of scoring a goal a set piece if they get a corner, a free kick, something
James
like
Ward
that.
Prowse for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, he's a very, very good set piece taker, but don't ask him to run because, you know.
Sure. Yeah. Get you a guy who can do both, like Declan Rice. Yeah, no, totally. And I think, you know, Jover, set piece coach at Arsenal, what's he worth? You know, like if I'm him, I'm going in asking for a pay rise roundabout now, because what he is delivering in terms of tangible results at both ends of the pitch is really, really impressive.
Yes, I completely agree.
And I suppose credit has to go to Mikel Arteta ultimately, who persuaded him to join the club and obviously knew him previously. But he has been a really impressive addition and is kind of, you know, the secret weapon of this Arsenal team, or not so secret weapon at this point in time, because we are so effective from those set pieces. And again, interesting to see another delivery from Declan Rice. You know, when you've got a team as tall as we had in this game, you can afford a guy like Declan Rice to be the one delivering the ball. And I thought both his crosses in this game were very, very good. First time he's ever recorded 2 assists in a Premier League game, I believe.
Well, there you go. And what a game to get those assists in. And I think, you know, the fact that everybody does know how good we are from set pieces, yet we remain very effective from set pieces, is another string in the bow for Nicolas Jover and for the players and the staff and the, you know, the coaching that goes into making this happen. And like you say, Declan Rice is taking some of the set pieces. Ben White is in there, but he's kind of like, you know, his role is chief irritant, if you like, more than somebody who's going to attack the ball. But Ben White is obviously very good in the air as well as a defender, centre half. I know he's playing at right back, but, you know, he's strong in that area. So it's not like we're throwing all of our big men in there and getting the little guy to chuck it in and hope for the best. You know, there's real...
No. And also there's nobody better in those scenarios than Gabriel. We spoke... James Benge did a stat and then I think had to change it when they threatened to take one of Gabriel's goals off him a couple of weeks ago. But it's now officially the case that he has scored the most goals from set pieces of any player in the Premier League since he joined Arsenal. So over 3.5 seasons in England, Gabriel now has 14 goals from dead ball scenarios. And as James points out, a lot of those other players who are right up there with him, they're shooting from free kicks. It's people like Ward-Prowse or a Salah or a Tony, guys who get to shoot from direct free kicks. He's doing that purely from being a kind of penalty box aerial threat.
That is amazing. Look, central defenders who score are, not exactly, we've had a few of those in the past, but Gabriel is not whacking them in from 30 yards like Thomas Vermaelen did, if you remember. This is a very different skill set. And, the reality is when you are that good, people know and they will try and do things to stop you scoring. So the ability to keep doing it at the rate that he's doing it is just hugely, hugely impressive.
It is, yeah. I mean, 14 goals in 3.5 seasons, that's a lot. I feel like we've probably got forwards who aren't that far ahead of that. So, I've got to take my hat off to him. He's the best in the league in that scenario.
4-0, Leandro Trossard with a really good goal. I think what I like about maybe goals 4 and 5 is that they look really simple, and you could say, well, the defending's not brilliant there, and maybe it's not, but what the two finishes do from Trossard and Saka, which we'll come on to, obviously, they make it look really easy. It's not 100% like a gift or anything like that. Trossard's finish is excellent. West Ham probably could get a bit closer, but, you just can't stop those.
No, it's a really lovely finish, and he sets it for himself beautifully, takes the ball in control, just gets it out of his feet, opens his body up. You know what he's going to want to do, but very difficult to stop it. And, I think, was it Odegaard who found him in the build-up? Yep. And he got the assist that I think his play had deserved. He produced a beautiful pass for Saka for that chance that just sort of went across the goal. I think he'd been very good, very busy in the final third and picking out some of those runs. Finds Trossard. He's a very good finisher. I feel like we say it quite often, but he really, really is. And there's that mad stat about him, speaking of stats, which is that I think only he's averaging a goal and an assist something like every 90 minutes. Only Thierry Henry and Robin van Persie have a better record of goal contributions for Arsenal at this point in time, which is kind of crazy.
That is mental, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, part of that is because I think he's been a really effective sub, right? So he's had situations where he's not played that many minutes, but he's got himself a goal or got himself an assist. Mm-hmm. But yeah, remarkable rate of productivity. So yeah, this was actually before the West Ham game, so I don't know what the latest is, but it was of players to have played a minimum of 1,000 minutes for Arsenal. Yeah, only Thierry Henry and Robin van Persie have a better minutes per goal involvement than Leandro Trossard in Arsenal's Premier League history.
Wow, a brilliant goal. Brilliant goal, and he's, he had a little dip in form, as I think most players did, around that kind of.
And we've taken him off the corners, Andrew. You'll be glad to see.
Hey, look, it worked. It worked. I dropped old Nicholas Jover a little.
DM.
Sent him a fax. Right. Said, listen, I've got an idea here.
Take it from me.
Yeah, take it from me. Anyway, brilliant goal. 4-0 at halftime, and West Ham made changes. They took Zuma and Alvarez off. They put Mavropanos and Phillips on. I was really... I watched Mikel Arteta's press conference, and he was asked about Calvin Phillips. Not once, but twice. He was asked about him in the pre-game, the live press conference, and then in the embargoed section. And he was, the first guy said, you obviously worked with him at Man City. And he was like, no, I didn't work with him. I was gone by then. I just didn't quite understand what all this focus on Mikel Arteta and Calvin Phillips was all about. I don't understand any focus on Calvin Phillips whatsoever.
No, nor I particularly, but I suppose people are just looking for an angle, aren't they? Maybe if they've got to write something about West Ham, they've got to find something interesting, but quite embarrassing, I suppose, to ask him about him when they didn't actually work together.
Yeah.
I mean, a curious situation, a guy who, was kind of a starter in the England team and then didn't get a kick for Man City, and now we're trying to relaunch his career. Absolutely ideal, I suppose, for him to be coming on at this game.
Yeah, perfect.
4-0 down at half time. Just the platform you want to recapture your form.
Did you get many messages about the Newcastle game?
No, I didn't.
It's so weird because I did. I got a few, and it was like, 4-0 up at halftime, away from home. Where have I seen this before? And it's just
I have to confess. I've admitted to some anxiety pre-game. I've admitted to some anxiety when Bukayo Saka stepped up to take that penalty kick. 4-0 up at half-time, I was feeling pretty confident.
Pretty confident. Me too, but it was just funny, the
trauma. It never leaves you. That's the thing.
Football trauma runs deep. It really does. But there was literally no chance of that happening again. West Ham were there was no way they were coming back into this game. It was really a question of, what way Arsenal were going to play the second half and what were they going to try and do. And I enjoyed the fact that we didn't just sort of sit there and see the game out. We tried to score more goals. We tried to make things happen. We stayed in control. We just didn't let West Ham back into it. You could see, West Ham, when you go in 4-0 at halftime, 4-0 down at halftime, the dressing room message is probably, well, this game is gone. At least sort of play for a bit of pride. They couldn't even be bothered to do that.
No.
They were just to
be fair, most of their fans had left at this point in time. I did enjoy those sort of aerial shots. Was it just before half time of supporters streaming away?
It's a weird one, though. I think the TV companies are doing that a lot this season.
Are they?
I've noticed it more than once, not just yesterday. In other games, not involving Arsenal, where the result is happening, and they're showing fans leaving at 87 minutes. What game was I watching? What game was it? I can't remember. Game over the weekend. Could have been the Wolves. Maybe I was watching the Wolves-Brentford game on Saturday.
Okay.
And Brentford scored quite late on, and then it was about 88 minutes, and some of the fans were like, well, fuck it. I'll just go, or, get a pint in early, and TV cameras are on them. This sort of weird...
I suppose it feeds the banter narrative, doesn't it?
It does a bit, but it's a bit odd.
Well, I was sort of thinking about it if I'd been a West Ham fan, and I was like, what would I be thinking or doing? And I think the moment that Bukayo Saka lashed in the fifth goal to the bottom corner, I think personally that would have been my breaking point.
You would have called it quits at that point.
I think so, yeah. There was something about the emphatic nature of the finish that was just like, this game is so over.
Yeah, I'm getting out of here. I'm getting out of here before Declan Rice scores one. That's what you'd be thinking.
Yeah, exactly, right. While you still can.
Yeah, it's a lovely goal from Saka. Again, are West Ham guilty of not doing as much as they could do? Probably. Again, watch Ward-Prowse. Doesn't fancy running. Doesn't fancy a little sprint towards Odegaard to cut out the pass. Saka steps inside, whacks it in the bottom corner. It's a great finish.
I think, actually, I know the next goal, was a special one for a lot of reasons, but I think this was my favourite goal of the day, the fifth one.
Yeah.
Something very visually pleasing about the way Saka just kind of drifted inside and wrong-footed the keeper. It was a lovely, lovely take.
Yeah, really excellent goal. And then the sixth goal, what a hit from Declan Rice, but we have to give flowers to Ben White. That is the assist of a lifetime there, isn't it? Wrong-footing two players, albeit your own players, to roll it perfectly into the path of Declan Rice to smash it home.
Yeah, and expertly left by Trossard and Odegaard. One for the training ground, you can see. What a hit from Declan Rice. There was something... sounds strange to say, but kind of inevitable about it. When you saw the ball kind of go between Trossard and Odegaard, you thought, well, someone's got to hit that, The way it just sat up, and wow, did he hit it? He took that beautifully.
It is a brilliant goal, a brilliant finish. Keeper has no chance. It's his second long ranger of the season, isn't it? Albeit first past an actual goalkeeper. Because Chelsea one, Chelsea one was
how on earth did he manage to keep his cool there and not celebrate that? I don't know. Remarkable stuff.
I mean, I think I would have certainly had a bit of a celebration. Probably given them, look. He obviously has a lot of affection for West Ham. Sometimes that not celebrating thing feels a bit performative.
Yeah.
Other times I can sort of understand it. I mean, I think players should celebrate goals and they should be able to celebrate goals without it offending the opposition fans. It's not like he was ever going to do an Adebayor and slide on his knees in front of the West Ham fans and give him the finger. But I think maybe in his mind, it was a case that, by the time it was 5-0, all the pantomime booing had stopped completely. They couldn't even be bothered to do that, and who could blame them at 5-0 down? And as a way of kind of drawing a line under all of it, I think the non-celebration did that, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Because now it might be a case you go back to West Ham and there might be a few guys but like for the most part, people will say, you were respectful when you came back here the first time in the Premier League, scored the goal, you've moved on, we've moved on. I think West Ham certainly have got bigger things to worry about than whether Declan Rice has moved to another London club. I think they need to look, maybe at the manager and all that. So as a way of just drawing a line under all of it, I understand what he did there.
Yes, yeah. He respectfully booted the ball into the top corner from 30 yards. And then somebody said to me afterwards, actually, that sometimes the decision to not celebrate can be so conscious as to almost be a celebration.
Yeah.
And I think in this case, that kind of felt true. It was sort of like his way of saying, your humiliation is complete. There is no need to rub salt into these gaping wounds. Yeah. And wow, what a way to cap it off. I did wonder if we might get Elliot's fabled 10-0. It really felt like anything was possible after that.
Well, I mean, he made a couple of changes then, didn't he? Very quickly.
He did. Yeah.
Mikel Arteta. He took Rice off.
That was Rice's last kick in the game, I think.
Right, even more cutting for West Ham. His last kick of the game was a screamer into the top corner. He did make changes. I think after that, there's sort of like 6-0. There's a kind of inevitability about what way the final stages are going to play out. Nevertheless, we did try and score more. Mohamed Elneny came on, had a couple of goes, put it over. There were a couple of moments where, maybe we could have made more of a chance in the final third.
Eddie had a shot saved.
Reece Nelson could have had a go with his left foot at one stage, I think.
Yeah.
Went for a cross. I suppose the most interesting aspect of the final stages of the game was the fact that Ethan Nwaneri came on and got a good few minutes under his belt. Mikel Arteta was saying that the players were whispering on the bench, put Ethan on, and that's a big moment for him.
That made me feel a bit sorry for the other young players. I was like, who's whispering put Ruel on? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'll come to that. But I think, I was really pleased to see one of the young guys get a run out, and what a moment for him. I mean, he's still only 16.
Yeah.
Is that right?
He is only 16. He doesn't look 16 at all. He does not look 16. And look, you can read too much into, or you can try and read too much into, a 15-minute cameo or whatever it was. But I texted you this, and I think, when I look at him, his sort of physical build, the way he moves with the ball, the way he holds onto it and then just knocks it away at the last minute, shades of Jack Wilshere in there. And I don't mean to, jinx him, and hopefully he will have a much more injury-free career than Jack, unfortunately, wasn't able to enjoy. But, this is what we do as football fans. We see a young player come through and it's like, well, who is he? Which of the former greats is this young guy? And, he is 16, but it was very, very evident how seamlessly he connected with all the players around him. Like, he had as many touches as Reiss Nelson, and Reiss Nelson came on like a good 10, 12 minutes before him. So he really got involved. I thought it was a very interesting cameo from him.
I think so, and Arteta spoke about it, didn't he, afterwards? You have to have the trust of your teammates. Do they give you the ball? I've certainly watched games in the past, in the quite recent past actually, where a young player's been in the starting 11, but you've sort of had the sense that, the first teamers were not in a hurry to find them. That wasn't the case here. I think obviously everyone's aware he's a really talented boy, and incredibly exciting for him to be involved in a Premier League game again at such a young age. When you look at the players who've played at that kind of age for Arsenal and what they've gone on to do, it's usually a really positive indicator. Exciting. We may look back on this day and think of it as one of the first sightings of a player who went on to be terrific for Arsenal. I hope so.
There was another nice little moment towards the end when Eddie Nketiah fouled Mavropanos. I don't know if you noticed this. This was good. Where he just sort of fouled him, tried to win the ball, but obviously fouled him. But that thing that happens where there's a foul and you look around, oh, look, it's my former teammate. It's 6-0, it's the end of the game. You could have a little moment, a little like, there you go. And Eddie just sort of completely blanked him. It was really funny.
Fair enough. I think as well, there was a nice moment in our own penalty box where West Ham had a kind of sniff of a chance. And I think at 6-0 up, Arsenal, I think David Raya made a save and Gabriel made a block, showed kind of more desire and intensity defensively than West Ham had at pretty much any point in the game.
Yes.
And I think that tells you a bit about kind of the mentality of the players at this point in time. I think their focus has really sharpened, and I think, they see what's in front of them now and what's possible. And I really liked that moment, the sort of desire to preserve the clean sheet, even though the game was beyond one at that point.
Oh, absolutely. And just, to finish part one, 3 points obviously was the most important thing, but 6 goals sends a bit of a statement as well.
It does. It doesn't hurt the goal difference.
No, it definitely doesn't hurt the goal difference. There's been so much discussion about goal scoring this season for Arsenal, so much discussion about our forwards, what we've got in the forward line, what we need in the forward line, what we're missing in the forward line. I watched the AFCON final last night, and Osimhen did not impress, really. That's a discussion, obviously, for another day. But for all that, without 7 key players, but without 7 first-team players, we've gone to West Ham, won 6-0. I think it sends a statement about what this Arsenal team are capable of, where the goals can come from, that variety that I know some people would trade maybe a little bit of variety for more of that, in inverted commas, killer up front. But we've now scored more goals this season than we had at the same period last season. We've more goals after 24 games this season than last season.
Yeah.
And I think there are real positives to take from that. I know a 6-0 scoreline will sort of tip the balance a little bit, right? And I'm not denying that we haven't had our issues in front of goal this season, because clearly we have. But when the title race could potentially, might not, but potentially it could come down to goal difference. A day like yesterday could be really, really important when it comes to the final stages of the season, if we can hang on in there, if it comes down to who scored the most goals, what goal difference is. I was really pleased that we didn't just settle for 4-0, because that game could have finished 4-0. We got a couple of extra in the second half, and I think it was very impressive, and I think Arteta will be very pleased with the ruthlessness, to use that word again.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think we're behind Man City on goals scored now. But it's not like we're a ton off them. I think we're 3 goals off Man City's tally for the season, albeit they've played a game less. We're 2 goals off Liverpool in terms of goals scored. And
conceded fewer than both of those teams.
Yeah, exactly. We've got the best defensive record in the league. So, A really, really good day. And it really sort of puts in Arsenal in a strong position. It builds on, it consolidates what we did against Liverpool, doesn't it? And sets us up nicely for everything to come. And as we head towards March and that critical period of the season, it looks like we're entering it in a good position. Yeah.
Couple of away games now before our next home game. We travel to Burnley next week, and then Porto in the Champions League before Newcastle. So that momentum, that confidence, I think is going to be really crucial for these upcoming games. So look, a good day all in all, and as we said, 6 of the best for West Ham, and no less than they deserved. Right, let's take a little break. We'll come back with your questions and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer questions that you send to us on Twitter @GunnerBlog and @Arseblog. Also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon.
I just want to say, Andrew, by the way, thank you to all the listeners for all the feedback on last week. Particularly my rant at the beginning. It was quite an extraordinary reaction.
Yes,
I think it struck a chord, shall we say. But a few people did get in touch to tell me that Chris Sutton is actually an all right guy. It's just a sort of on-air persona. So I think it's important we clarify. It's not that Chris Sutton is a cunt. It's that all it is, he looks, talks and sounds like he is a cunt. Do you see what I mean? It's a very subtle distinction. So he always sounds and seems like a cunt. But that is just his on-air persona. In real life, he's not a cunt. But everything you see and hear from him will say cunt.
Right. It's just a character.
It's just this on-air persona. And to clarify, it's not that I, James McNicholas, the real-life person, think he's a cunt. But my on-air persona absolutely does.
All right. Fair enough.
Does that clear that up?
I think we've got that clarified. Yeah, just in case anyone was in any doubt whatsoever.
Cool.
All right. I'm going to start with the questions, if that's okay.
Yes.
Senior Grey Dog says, most goodliest morning. If Liverpool was a fuck-off win, what would you call this one?
Liverpool's a fuck-off win. I guess this is a...
Go fuck yourselves win?
Go fuck yourselves, maybe, yeah. Yeah. It's sort of like... it's the sort of win that makes me almost feel sorry for the other team because it's so emphatic and so demoralising and so clear-cut. I mean, yeah. It's a win where you've put somebody in their place, isn't it?
Yeah. Who were the quotes from that I enjoyed? I think it was from Soufal. Right. I've never experienced such a big loss like today, and I hope I never experience it again. It's so embarrassing for me and the team when Arsenal are passing the ball to each other and their fans are applauding every pass. It's embarrassing for us, for the fans, for West Ham. Maybe we showed Arsenal too much respect, but we should never play like this at home.
I think, as much as I'd love to have a sort of catchy, sweary name for it, I think it was sort of a football lesson, really. It really was. We properly schooled them with all the corporal punishment that used to entail.
The Hammers got hammered. No two ways about it. The Hammers got
hammered, yeah. They got what was coming. And in the League Cup game, we played poorly that day, really poorly. I'm not sure we played that poorly at any other point in the season.
Fulham.
Yeah, maybe so. But I think in the home game, as we said in part 1, it was kind of the margins that went against us. And what I really liked is that we sort of adhered to those principles, but just sort of added the ruthlessness that was required.
Can I just follow that up? Do you mind if I follow that up with another one? Raisins with an E says, Saka was quoted after the game saying, I think we smelled blood today and went for the kill. How happy does that make you? And, I think we kind of discussed that in part 1, that we did turn the screw a little bit in the second half. I wanted to ask you about Saka's post-match comments, his post-match interview on Sky, I think it was. And he said, well, I don't know if I can be really happy today because I missed a couple of chances. And he scored a big penalty, won the penalty, scored a brilliant goal. And he's, saying, could have done better. I like that.
Yeah, I think even when he got given the man of the match, didn't Odegaard say, I was waiting for the hat-trick? Setting high standards for himself and high expectations. But, those numbers that he's produced since he came to the team are amazing. What is it now? 51 goals, 49 assists, 100 goal contributions in little over 200 games, isn't it? I think 210 appearances, something like that. That is amazing. And he continues to be so consistent in his output. It feels like even when his form amongst us is kind of the subject of debate or scrutiny, when I say us, I mean the Arsenal fans. Sure. I feel like there's often sort of, conversation about, is Saka really at his best? Does he really hit form? And yet, week after week, the numbers speak for themselves. I kind of feel like if you were a fan of another club and you listened in to Arsenal podcasts over the course of the season and how often they sort of deal with the question of, is Saka really on form? I think they'd be completely flabbergasted and amazed at like the degree to which we debate that.
Maybe, but I think there is something to it as well. I think, he is so incredibly productive, and I think it's also not unfair to say that he hasn't been at his very, very best this season.
No, listen, I don't think it's wrong. I just think from the outside,
sure,
you'd be amazed in the context of those numbers. But I think it's probably fair to say, can he be better? Can he produce more? And I think, if anything, it speaks to our faith in his talent and his own faith in his talent, as indicated by that post-match interview. Yeah. So I think it's exciting to think that there is still more to come. Like I say, I loved his second goal. I loved it. I just think he's got the capability to do that almost at will, to do it even more regularly than he currently does. And there have been times in the past 12 to 18 months where he's looked like a player close to sort of going to an even higher level. And I think it's within him to do it.
Agree, yeah.
So I hope he can get there.
For club and country this season, he's got 20 goals and 14 assists.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah. They're big numbers.
Yeah, and wait till he starts playing well.
Well, yeah. And, just again, I mean, how extraordinary to have a player like that who costs you almost nothing, just what it costs to develop him, to come through your academy and be that productive. It doesn't happen very often. It happened to Spurs, when they got Harry Kane. But it's very, very, very rare and very special.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, here is an interesting question. And we did talk about this a bit in part one, but Ben Satiris on Twitter says, does scoring 16 goals in the last 4 games end the debate over whether we need a prolific number 9?
I don't think that debate will ever end.
It was interesting. I heard in the commentary yesterday, Alan Smith almost play into it at times. I think...
Yeah, the Trossard, when he headed over and he said something about like, oh, if you had a real centre forward there, with a couple of extra inches, that should be a goal. I
remember thinking, that's still quite a difficult chance. It was a header like about 15 yards out, and Trossard kind of did okay. And Alan Smith was that kind of centre forward, so maybe he sort of carries that baggage with him. But I did sort of think... I'm not sure that moment was kind of evidence of why we need a striker.
The thing is, when you win a game 6-0, you can make all the arguments about how the goals that are in this team are sufficient for us to do what we need to do. And when you have a game like the other game we had against West Ham where we don't put the ball in the net, everyone is going to say that the answer to that problem is, a centre forward, a number 9, a powerhouse or whatever, And I genuinely don't know what the truth is here. Like, if you can score 6 goals against West Ham, and if you can beat Liverpool, and if you can beat Manchester City this season, if you can beat Manchester United this season, you know, does that really suggest there is a glaring weakness? I don't think it does. Is there a need or a desire to always look to improve and add something to your squad? Yes, of course. But I think, you know, football is quite random and arbitrary at times, and it doesn't always hold to the prescribed script that people think is going to play out in front of them. And that's really difficult to analyze. It's really difficult to put a satisfactory explanation on why certain things happen and don't happen in football games. And I just don't know really what else to say about this. Like, would you take a superb centre forward at Arsenal tomorrow? Yeah. Who wouldn't? But is it the thing that's completely holding us back from winning a title? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one. I think basically my feeling is if it's great, for example, that you're sharing the goals amongst, say, 5 players, why not share them among 6? Like, if you can add another goal scorer to your squad, then absolutely do it. I would say that I do have some reservations about this idea that what Arsenal need to do is go out and spend 150 million on one guy that's going to be the difference. Yeah. I feel a little bit hesitant about that. I think that generally this club's best work, especially when it comes to recruitment, has been done at a lower level than that. And I feel like generally in football, you're better kind of hedging your bets a bit more than putting the kitchen sink and everything on one deal. I wonder if maybe it will be a kind of lower fee for a player who augments the attack, but doesn't arrive with that pressure of like, you must be the guy and we must adapt the way we play to you.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I've said it before. I think maybe the striker signing or the forward signing that we make, you know, if we make one in the summer, is very unlikely to be Osimhen, or it's very unlikely to be Ivan Toney, even though there's a huge clamour for him and probably a desire on his part to come and join Arsenal. I would be very surprised for various reasons if that was a deal that Arsenal were willing to do. But you're right, add a player who can bring some variety to your team, add a player who can score goals. Of course, everyone wants that, but I just think the whole debate is framed in this way that you're kind of searching for the holy grail of a footballer, and I think that's kind of impossible.
Yeah. Unless you sign Declan Rice, that's different.
Well, we have a question here. So, you talk about big money signings. So there was a question on the Discord from Chidi9263 who says, "Goodly morning, guys. I must say I was a bit nervous with the mammoth fee we paid for Rice, as most transfers in that range tend to flop. Is he so far the best transfer above £80 million in Premier League history? See attached image for reference." Here are the plus £80 million signings from least expensive to most expensive. At the bottom, Jadon Sancho. Then it's Darwin Núñez, followed by Harry Maguire, Josko Gvardiol, Antony, Paul Pogba, Romelu Lukaku, Moises Caicedo, the aforementioned Declan Rice in third, followed by Jack Grealish, and then Enzo Fernandez.
Whew. He's right up there. And so this is exactly what we're talking about. Like, that list of names is what worries me about the idea of spending £100 million plus on a centre forward. You've got to be so sure. And something that can seem entirely sure can go wrong. There's a kind of chaos factor in all acquisitions, right? You just don't quite know how a player will fit and settle at any club. But there were a lot of things about Rice that made it a safer bet. I think the fact that he was coming from the Premier League, the fact that he didn't even need to move house, very settled where he is, his nationality, all those things helped make it more of a guarantee. But even so, yeah, I think he's exceeded most people's expectations. Is he the best signing on that list? I think Grealish, while I don't think what Grealish has produced at City is sort of justifies his fee, they did win a treble with him in the team. And I think that's quite, it's sort of difficult to knock that.
Sure.
But I think Rice, in terms of his individual impact on a side, he's got to be right up there, hasn't he?
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing about Grealish is that in order for them to win the treble with Grealish, they had to de-Grealish Grealish.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They had to completely deprogram him, stick him in a dark room for 6 months, stick a bag over his head and make him forget everything that was kind of good and enjoyable about him as a footballer. And I suppose it's to his credit that he has adapted in that way, because he looked a little bit out of place in his first season at Manchester City. No denying he had a very, very good second season for City, and they won all those trophies, of course. But, did it come at an individual cost for him in terms of, what people enjoy and like about him or liked about him as a footballer? Maybe that's what you got to do. Maybe that's what you have to do, to win the big prizes. You have to adapt rather than the team adapting to you. But I think it's quite interesting as well, the part of the reason he hasn't been as involved this season with Manchester City is that they've got a guy who's, got a bit more Grealish about him in Doku, that kind of unpredictability, that willingness to sort of run with the ball and try things, which Guardiola coached out of Grealish himself.
Yeah, he's been tamed by Guardiola, certainly. And it raises some interesting questions, like, would you rather be the flair guy, the hub of the team in an Aston Villa, say, or would you rather go and collect medals with Man City?
I think he'd rather collect the medals.
Well, there you go. He's made his choice, hasn't he? Collect not just the medals, but the salary as well, which doesn't hurt. But I agree that it's sort of been a certain degree of individual cost to him. I mean, you do get these maverick players who resist that and who stay with their club. And, it was in the 90s, you'd have like Matt Letizia at Southampton or whatever it might be. But I feel like now the trend is, you go where you can win and you go where you can make the most money. And that's what he's done. But
you think back, or you look at, where things are now, and it's patently clear that Matt Letizia is a fucking moron.
Yeah.
And that's part of why he didn't move, I guess.
That may just be his on-air persona, Andrew. We must be careful. But I think...
which is a cunt, by the way.
I think, Rice is just a very special player. I mean, I heard sort of Gary Neville and Roy Keane trying to describe and quantify what it is about him. They were speaking about his athleticism, his power, his ability to get to the ball in situations where other players just can't. And I think that is undoubtedly a big part of what he offers. But I do think there is a kind of psychological X factor as well. I think he is a leader and a winner. And I know that those things may feel like kind of soft factors and they're difficult to define, but you do see it in football from time to time, these very special characters who can propel their teams to great feats. He has done that at West Ham. He won a European trophy with not particularly good West Ham team. And I believe he's capable of doing it at Arsenal as well. I think he's a really, really special player.
He's an all-rounder in a way, isn't he? And certain players are good at certain things and they're very good in their defined positions, whereas Rice, he can play as a 6, he can play as an 8, he can play at centre-half if you need him to play at centre-half. He's good good in the air, good set-piece delivery. There's a lot of things that he is really good at, and not a lot of players are really good at a lot of things, and he is certainly one of those.
But he also has Roy of the Rovers DNA.
Yes,
basically.
In the summer, he plays cricket really well and stuff.
Sure. Yeah, like, you know, when you need a last-minute winner against Luton, he's there. When you need a last-minute winner against Manchester United, he's there. When he goes back to his former club, he belts one in from 30 yards. There is this sort of weird comic book capability for the extraordinary, which I think... and I don't mean to do him down with this, but it sort of surpasses his talent in some respects. And I don't know what that is.
Sort of force of nature kind of vibe. Like you, I know exactly what you're talking about, but it is very hard to sort of put it into specifics.
Yeah, I think it must be mentality.
Character, personality, all of those things that come, you know, like you say, it's intangible, but you know it when you see it, and you know it when you don't have it, and certainly he's got it.
What about this question? We've had from a couple of people. Kieran Tom Sajan says, this might be short-sighted, and I know he's probably the most hard-working player in the team, but are we playing better without Jesus? And Randy Martian says, goodly morning, fellas. How does Jesus get back into this side? I can see him more as a backup winger or chaos striker, but does he actually fit into Mikel's strategy anymore?
I mean, the first thing, how does he get back in the side, is get fit and stay fit. That's the obvious thing to say. Again, this feels a little bit like, when an injured player is out and things aren't going well, and that player then takes on, all the qualities that you're missing from a team. I think sometimes it works the other way too, that when a team does well in the absence of a player, you can overlook how good he is and what he can bring to this team. So I think he does still have a role, for sure. He does still have a role up front, absolutely. If we are to go where we want to go with what's left of this season, I would feel a lot more confident if we had a fit Gabriel Jesus in the squad. Does it mean he's going to start every game? I'm not sure. I think maybe, we've demonstrated that there are certain games where the opposition's approach can be dealt with some of the players that, we have beyond Jesus, like Trossard, like Havertz. But I'm not into the idea that we've moved beyond him, or that the system doesn't suit him, or that he can't contribute. I don't think that's true. I think he can do more. I think he can deliver more. I think certainly, if you're the starting number 9 for a team like Arsenal, you should be scoring more goals. But I just want to see him back and fit. And, I'm not ready to write him off. I just, I think we're going to need him. We're going to need, as many of these players who've been missing, we're going to need them between now and May. It's not just domestic football now. We've got Champions League coming up. We are going to get stretched. So we need to get some of these injured players back. And certainly if you were prioritizing the players who are coming back from injury, he'd be very, very close to the top of the list for me.
I'm with you. I think it's a bit reactionary. I think that it's funny enough. I think we were having this debate almost exactly 12 months ago. I think when Trossard had come in and was playing as the false 9, and people were saying, how's Jesus going to get his place back? Trossard's doing really well. I think it's good that Trossard has kind of reminded everyone, including Arteta. I know he kind of shared centre-forward duties with Havertz a bit in this game, but I think he's kind of reminded everyone that he is an option in that position. And there are things that he offers that are really, really positive. And I think Jesus really needs to take a leaf out of Trossard's book when it comes to end product and, match some of his goal scoring. Because at the moment, if you're thinking who's likeliest to actually get a goal in the game, to be honest, you feel like it's Trossard. But Jesus, I don't doubt, will have a part to play. And during the sort of mid-season break, I picked him somewhat optimistically as the player to have a kind of breakout, big, impressive second half of the season. Now, right now, that looks like a bad pick. But if we are to do something extraordinary and win the league, I'm sure he'll have been part of it.
Yeah, because, he can play wide as well. And he can bring something to the centre-forward position that, Trossard and Havertz, they do it differently. And people will say, well, or certainly Trossard brings more goals at this moment in time. But, we're going to need this full squad as much as possible. And he's a very, very good player. His injury record is frustrating. Of course it is. But, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater with this one. Where was the one I was going to ask? Oh, yeah. 5 Wenger Death Punch says, could you give me your percentages on how much of post-warm weather training dominance you credit to rested players and how much to Arteta for having time to implement some new tactics? Saka, White and Martinelli all look properly fit for the first time this season. Tactically, the front line is freely rotating, creating danger all over the box. We played Liverpool with Kai and Odegaard as dual 10s, and yesterday we inverted more from right back, allowing Kivior to shine defensively without putting him in midfield positions he is less comfortable in. And can I just say, I meant to mention this in the first half, that Ben White, we talked about him annoying the goalkeeper, but Ben White was overlapping and playing in midfield throughout yesterday, and I think that aspect of his performance deserves a lot of credit as well, because we did shift things very slightly in that first half, where you would see Ben White as the one who was coming central to create those triangles and those passing options for Saka and Odegaard. And it's unusual, to see that happen with our right back. And they've obviously decided Kivior is more solid if he doesn't have to take on that extra responsibility. So there was a little tactical shift there as well.
Definitely. And I think Kivior benefited from it. And that's quite an interesting theme of our last few games, is that there's been significant variation in the way that we've played, the way we've set up, even the shape. And last season it was very much, we knew what the team was. There were little tweaks week by week, but pretty much everybody, including the opposition, knew what we were going to try to do if we had everybody available. And I think some of the changes have been enforced, but I also think that Arteta wants that kind of like Swiss Army knife feel to the team, where he can make adjustments, he can set up slightly differently. And what's been really positive has been to have consistency of performances through that. What do I credit the resurgence? I mean, I think physical freshness is certainly part of it, but I don't think you can underestimate, and again, it's much harder to measure, but mental freshness as well. I think that it's a slog, that first half of the season, especially when you get into those winter months, you're travelling midweek for European games as well. You've got to remember, in this period, until next... the week after next, or next week, that's not something we're having to contend with. We're basically playing one game a week. It's pretty manageable. We're out of 2 domestic cups. Our fixture list in January and early part of Feb has been pretty lean. And I think that helps physically and mentally to cope with the kind of load. I think it's going to get much more challenging once the Champions League recommences. And I hope that we'll be up to that challenge, but we need players back. We really, really need a few players back.
Sure. And we did talk about how the break came at sort of the right time for Arsenal, where you could draw a line in the sand and just put that behind you and then just focus on the second half of the season. And I do think there is something to that. You mentioned physical freshness, and you're absolutely right. We need to get these players back. We have to have the ability to rotate and to manage the minutes that these players are being asked to play, because it is a very, very thin squad at this moment in time. And all credit to them yesterday for getting that win with the first team that we had out there, enabling some of the substitutions, to come on. So a big win, but when you're playing Champions League game in midweek, then you've got a high pressure game at the weekend, and then another Champions League game. You'll get found out if you don't have the numbers. So hopefully we can get those guys back.
Quick question here on those substitutions. Actually, it's from Andrew, the Hinkley Gooner. And Andrew says, "Goodly morning ×6, gents. We all saw how amazing it was yesterday, so I'll offer a different question. It was great seeing Nwaneri come on, but why the fuck did Cedric come on ahead of Walters? He's the future. Cedric clearly isn't. That was a strange one for me."
There's two things that spring to mind. One is that he put Nwaneri on the right.
Yeah.
And wanted him to have some experience around him and behind him, maybe. Mm-hmm. So whatever else,
fair, I think,
whatever else you would say about Cedric, he certainly got experience. Maybe that was the reason for it. Maybe the other reason is that Rue Walters isn't as ready as Ethan Nwaneri to get minutes. I don't know. I haven't seen enough of him. So I don't really know. I just wonder if it was, part of it was just Arteta's slight conservatism when it comes to things like this, where I'll put a 16-year-old on, but I won't put a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old on. I don't know.
I think, we've got to consider Walters' contract situation. He's out of contract at the end of the season. So I don't know if it's correct to say he's the future. I think there's every chance he's not at the club in a few months' time.
Yeah, they might have made that decision already, and he's just sort of there, kind of, it might sound harsh, but to sort of make up the numbers, or if we absolutely have to have another defender on the bench, he is that option. I'm not, that could be it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been quite stretched at fullback at times this season, and he's not had a look in, which I think probably tells you about where he is in Mikel Arteta's thoughts. I feel for him a little bit, because I think there've been moments where other managers might have given him a chance, and I think the contract thing, it's a two-way street, right? I'm not sure how keen he would be to sign a new contract under the current circumstances, because he doesn't get any playing time, and it may not be what's best for his career and his development. I would rather personally have seen him get an opportunity than Cedric, but I think you make a great point about the inexperience potentially on that flank simultaneously. And I think as well, Arteta probably has to consider, for squad harmony, like, who's the more influential personality in the squad? Who do I have to charm more to keep everybody happy? And I think he would have made the decision that, in the short term at least, it's probably Cedric.
Why? I mean, why does he have to keep him happy? Like, that's a genuine, and I'm with you. Like, I would have preferred to see Walters, and I tried to explain, I think, why I think we didn't. But I don't know that at this point, with Cedric, in the final few months of, his contract at Arsenal, everyone knows he's going to go in the summer. It's not a question of keeping him happy, but maybe, I don't know.
I see, personally, I think it's one of the hardest things to do as a manager, but how do you keep the people on the very fringes engaged to kind of foster that sense of togetherness and harmony, and we're all doing this for each other, we're all prepped if we're suddenly needed. I think that is part of it, and I think you've got to throw people a bone sometimes. I actually think Arteta, I think he could do more of that. I think there are minutes he could chuck to players on the fringes maybe a little bit more often, but it's not really his style. But I do wonder if that's, and also the other thing to say is we may just be massively overanalyzing this, and it was as simple as protecting Ben White, and he views Cedric as higher up the pecking order, and that's that.
Yeah, that probably is it. As if it came down to it, if there was a big game and we had to take Ben White off, and the options were Cedric or Walters, who's going on, and it is probably.
Do you want the guy who's never played for the club, or do you want the guy who's won the Euros? Yeah,
yeah. For
what it's worth, I guess you're going Cedric, aren't you? So,
yeah. Well, Arteta is,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because there was a time where I think Arteta was from what I heard anyway, was quite excited about Walters' talent. Like when he was, like we're talking a couple of years ago, like when Mikel was quite early in the club, he was someone he brought up and had trained with the first team quite a lot at quite a young age. I seem to remember he was on the bench like in those early days, and people were like, who is this guy? And there was genuinely quite a lot of excitement within the club about him. But it's not quite come to fruition. And if I had to say now, I don't think it will. I think he'll probably go in the summer and try his luck elsewhere, and who knows. But yeah, it's just sort of interesting, isn't it, how there can be a lot of excitement at one point in a player's development and then things change quite quickly. 2 words, Miguel Aziz. Yes. There you go. Exactly. It's just a demonstration of, how somebody can be really, really highly rated, but that, maybe that last step between youth football and stepping up to the first team is too challenging for whatever reason. Let's just finish with this one from Wise Marklar. He says, this isn't a joke. Okay. So bear that in mind. Don't laugh, guys. Does OLEing put players at risk? Calvin Phillips in particular looked like he wanted to snap someone in half as we made him chase his own shadow. I think that's an interesting question. So do I. That's why I asked it. Yeah. This Marklar is indeed wise. I think it does a little bit. It does. I'm trying to think where OLEs start. I'm trying to think, is it something that comes from the fans or is it something that comes from the players? Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of what's actually happening on the pitch. I think it's quite symbiotic. Because what Arsenal did at 4-0 up yesterday, maybe it was 4-0, I'll have to look up, because I didn't mention it in the live blog. So let me just look back at the live blog just before half-time. 50 minutes in, OLEs already from the Arsenal fans. But I think the OLEs were a response to the way Arsenal were playing, as much as the fans having a great time and enjoying themselves. And I don't want to take anything away from, the people who go to the games and travel to games. They're perfectly entitled to have as much fun as possible. And if you're 4-0 up away from home, why the fuck not, right? Even if it's personally something it just puts me on edge. Right. Just, that's me. I'm not saying it's right or wrong or anything. That's just the way I feel about it, particularly in the first half. But I do think Arsenal just didn't let West Ham near the ball. They just passed it around. And I think that leads to the OLEs in a way. And then the OLEs lead to maybe being a bit more secure in possession, go back, recirculate. I think of OLEs as quite passive. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think of them as being sort of when you're playing without particular purpose. I think it's more about winding up the opposition. Right. That's the way I interpret them anyway. I could be wrong, but it feels like, look at us. You can't get it. Look at you. You're shit. Look, we've got the ball. You still can't get it. There's an element of that to the OLEs for me. Yeah, I think that's true. I also sort of have a feeling about them as kind of sort of the Mexican wave of football chants. It's like, this is no longer a contest. Yeah. What amusement can we make for ourselves? But I definitely think they're going to rile people up, aren't they? Yeah, there was a few moments late in the second half where you could see a couple of West Ham players were a bit fed up, and there were a couple of tackles went in, and Kudus might have been one of them where he had a couple of nibbles. And I think I did remark on it in the live blog that there were a couple where the West Ham player came crashing in, sliding in, and the Arsenal players, being the wonderfully quick and nimble athletes that they are, were able to step out of the way, but had those tackles been like half a second better timed or worse timed, I don't know which, they might have been quite serious. Martinelli took a couple of kicks, didn't he? And yeah, I remember that. So there is an element of that. But to be honest, I think if you're beating a team 5 or 6-0, I think whether anyone's saying Olé or not, there's a chance of someone taking out some frustration on you.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's just the reality of football, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suspect the chants are kind of, a bit of a red herring, really. I think it's actually the scoreline and the humiliation of that that provides the greatest motivation.
It's all part of the mix. I think it's the cocktail of frustration that you create when you're winning a game like that, when you play the way you play, that elicits the Olés or vice versa, and then all of those things, just become part of it. But fuck it, we came out of it all right. We won 6-0, and everybody's happy today. So that's the main thing.
Great stuff.
All right. We had better leave it there. As ever, thank you very much indeed, as always, for being with us. We really appreciate you listening, downloading, subscribing, sharing, and all the rest. Do join us a bit later on over on Patreon for an episode of The 30, looking back at all the weekend's Premier League action. That's patreon.com/Arseblog. For now, take it easy, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.